This just opened the door to my next question. How is surrogacy different than adoption?
Well,
Because on the surface, you could look at it as couple wants to have a child, they're not able to conceive for some reason,
right,
and they're going to pay money and get a child. And I know adoption is very different than that. That's a very cold way of putting it.
right,
And I don't mean that that's necessarily what I think it is. I'm just saying that if I was someone who didn't know anything about church teachings and I was looking at it on the surface,
right.
to me, they might look the same. So can you explain why they're different?
So let's look at, you actually kind of highlighted some various ways of approaching this. You look at the two different acts that are involved. So when you look at the issue of surrogacy, there's an intent and there's an action that occurs in order to achieve that end. And so in surrogacy, you're already dealing with immoral means. So we have an exploitation that is occurring, not only of the woman herself, but also the procreative means by which life is to be welcomed, is being denied in such this situation. And because, whether we're talking about artificial insemination, even if it's her own ovum that is being used, it is still not by conjugal love. It is still not by a marital act. It is not it could be even her own, the situation here is, again, we're using a means to achieve an end. And so the child is not begotten. The child is, in a sense, an act has been employed to substitute for an act that should in itself always be open to the gift of life. So now adoption is a different kind of act, because here it's the fact that you have a child that is begotten of parents, in some situations difficult, as we've done many times here in talking about the issue of pregnancy care centers and situations that may be dealing with violence. It might be dealing with a consenting act, but not able to raise the child. You might have a situation of poverty that we've seen in other countries where they would love to raise their child, but the means by which they need are not available to them. We just wrote a story recently on an issue in Hungary.
Yeah.
So there are many stories like this, but adoption is that the child is being given a chance to be raised in a family that will welcome and love and care that the parents could not provide for whatever means. So it wasn't done through some type of artificial insemination. It wasn't done by some type of in vitro fertilization. It was done, as we have known, in a natural act, whether between parents or people who love each other or in other situations.
So basically, with surrogacy, you have a couple wants a child, they pay money, so that child is created and they're given a child.
Right.
Versus with adoption, a couple wants a child and they're going to take a child who may not be able to grow up with a loving home for some reason, and they're going to take them,
Right.
invite them into their home and
Right.
welcome them.
And even though there may be some contractual relationship, they're different kinds of acts. So because what people look at today is, well, to adopt a child can be very expensive. There's lots of legal fees and things. But at one time, this was not the case. We all know, if we're old enough to remember, especially in the Catholic Church, we had beautiful Catholic charities that used to do this very, very beautifully, and many orphanages run by the Catholic Church, where children that were, for whatever means, the parents could not raise them, and the sisters, the brothers, the various institutes within the church would raise these children and find good homes for them. There might have been some legal fees or legal things attached to that, but they were very minimum, to be able to foster adoption. And I know adults today that were adopted that way and are so grateful that their parents had the courage, at the time to give them for adoption when they could not raise them themselves.
So those fees are basically an imposition of the government having to put legal things there. They're not it's different than a couple paying money to get a child.
Different
as a
kind of
commodity.
contract, different kind of act. Now I would say this, and I'll put this first to here. I am a strong advocate for changing the way that we do this, because I think it's absurd from what I hear from adopting parents of how much money is having to be spent in order to adopt a child. And I think that's something that has to be addressed.
To take a child who may not have a home and give them a home,
Absolutely,
a loving home.
absolutely.
The child, in a sense, deserves that. They deserve to grow up with loving parents, even if for some reation it's not able to be their own biological parents.
And in this situation, again, we're dealing with two different acts from the very beginning. And, so adoption is not entering into a moral means,
Mhm.
whereas the first is an immoral act.
Mhm.
And because the whole act itself, is opposed to the dignity of human life. Adoption is an act of charity, an act of kindness, an act of love, an openness, a sacrificial gift that is being made on behalf of the adopting parents. And I would say in some cases, where the actual biological parent or parents, just for whatever reason, are not able to raise their child,
Mhm.
lovingly give their child an opportunity that the child may not have had.